The internet is on fire tonight, and if you thought reality TV drama couldn't get any messier, buckle up, because this one has fans absolutely spiraling. A grainy hotel hallway clip, leaked just hours ago, is being dissected frame by frame, pause by pause, and the question everyone is asking is the same. Did Kirk just cross a line that can't be uncrossed? And more importantly, did he betray Rashida's trust in the most public way possible? Fans are shocked. Emotions ran high the moment the footage hit social media. Kirk, unmistakable in a dark hoodie, stepping out of a hotel room with a mystery woman whose face is partially hidden, but whose body language tells a story all its own. The whispers started immediately. Who is she? Why that hotel? And why now, when Rashida has been preaching loyalty, forgiveness, and family unity louder than ever? Within minutes, comment sections exploded. Some fans jumped to Kirk's defense, insisting the footage proves nothing. Others weren't so patient, accusing him of playing the same dangerous games that nearly destroyed their marriage before. And then came the real gut punch, sources claiming Rashida was blindsided by the leak, finding out at the exact same time the rest of the world did. Behind closed doors, tensions were already simmering. Friends had noticed the distance. Family members felt something was off. But no one expected this. As one fan put it, this isn't just tea, this is betrayal. Tonight, we're breaking down the leaked footage, the explosive reactions, and the emotional fallout that could change everything. Because if trust was already fragile, this might be the crack that finally shatters it. The fallout didn't wait for morning. Within minutes of the footage spreading, phones were buzzing, group chats were exploding, and timelines refreshed faster than anyone could keep up with. Fans were shocked not just by what they saw, but by how familiar it all felt. The clip was short, barely 12 seconds long, but it carried the weight of years of unresolved tension. Kirk steps into the hallway first, glancing left, then right, like someone who knows exactly what's at stake. A beat later, the mystery woman follows, adjusting her jacket, laughing softly. That laugh is what sent fans over the edge. It wasn't nervous. It wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. By the time Rashida's name started trending, the narrative had already split into camps. One side screaming betrayal, the other preaching patience. But behind the scenes, emotions ran high in a way no comment section could fully capture. According to people close to the situation, Rashida was at home when the first message came through. Not a call, not a warning, a screenshot, a single line of text underneath that read, "Is this Kirk?" Silence filled the room as she watched the clip on loop, her face unreadable, her jaw tight. This wasn't just about what happened in that hotel hallway. It was about everything that came before it. Memories rushed back, the apologies, the promises, the public forgiveness that cost her pride but won her praise. Fans had called her strong, loyal, a woman who held her family together when it would have been easier to walk away, and now, with one leaked clip, all of that strength was being tested again. A close friend later claimed Rashida didn't cry at first. She laughed, not because it was funny but because it felt unreal. Not again, she reportedly said under her breath. Not like this. Meanwhile, Kirk was already on damage control mode. His phone lit up with missed calls he chose not to answer. Instead, he dialed one number repeatedly until someone finally picked up. His voice was low, tense. "You said nobody saw us," he snapped. A pause. Then, "This is bad. This is really bad." Whoever was on the other end tried to calm him down, reminding him that a clip didn't tell the whole story. But Kirk knew better. Fans don't wait for explanations. They decide first, judge later. By the afternoon, blogs were running with headlines screaming betrayal and secret meetings. Speculation grew wilder by the hour. Some claimed the woman was an old friend. Others insisted she was someone new, someone Rashida had explicitly warned Kirk about. Screenshots of past interviews resurfaced, moments where Rashida talked about boundaries and respect, words that now felt painfully ironic. Fans began stitching together timelines, counting days, matching outfits, even comparing hotel decor to other photos Kirk had posted weeks earlier. Inside the family circle, things were already cracking. A relative reached out to Rashida, trying to play peacemaker. "Don't let the internet ruin your home," they urged. But that only made things worse. Rashida snapped back, "The internet didn't walk out of a hotel room with another woman." The family was left divided, some urging privacy, others quietly admitting this looked bad. Really bad. That evening, Kirk finally showed up at home. No cameras, no producers, just heavy air and unspoken words. He stood near the doorway, hands in his pockets, rehearsed lines ready but confidence gone. Rashida didn't yell. That's what scared him most. She simply asked, "Who is she?" Kirk hesitated. Too long. The pause said more than any answer could. "It's not what it looks like," he finally muttered, the oldest line in the book. Rashida let out a slow breath, shaking her head. "That's exactly what it looks like," she replied. Emotions ran high as the conversation spiraled. Kirk tried to explain, to minimize, to reframe. He said it was business. He said it was a coincidence. He said nothing happened. Rashida listened, arms crossed, eyes glossy but focused. You promised me, she said quietly. You promised our family. That's when Kirk's voice broke. He admitted he'd been feeling trapped, watched, judged. The pressure, the expectations, the constant reminder of his past mistakes. I needed air, he said. I needed to feel normal. Rashida's response was instant. Normal doesn't require secrecy. Outside their home, fans were already picking sides. Some praised Rashida for her composure, calling her a queen for not immediately walking away. Others questioned why she stayed at all, urging her to choose herself this time. Kirk's mentions filled with accusations, memes, and harsh reminders of history. Every move he made was scrutinized, every silence interpreted as guilt. As the night wore on, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a reckoning. Trust once broken and patched together was now fraying again, thinner than ever. And while Kirk insisted there was more to the story, Rashida was left facing a painful question she thought she'd already answered years ago. How many times can forgiveness survive before it turns into regret? The silence after that conversation was louder than any argument they'd ever had. Kirk retreated to the guest room, the door closing softly but carrying finality. Rashida stayed in the living room long after midnight, scrolling through her phone, watching the world debate her life like it was a storyline written for their entertainment. Fans were shocked by how quickly opinions hardened. She deserves better, sat right next to, she knew who she married. Every comment felt like a verdict, and none of them asked how it felt to live it. By morning, the mystery woman was no longer just a blur in a hallway. Amateur detectives claimed to have identified her through jewelry, shoes, even the way she walked. Names started circulating, some completely false, others dangerously close to the truth. One blogger claimed she'd been seen with Kirk before, at a business dinner, that suddenly didn't look so innocent in hindsight. Another swore Rashida had met her once and felt uncomfortable but brushed it off to keep the peace. Whether true or not, the damage was done. Perception had become reality. Kirk finally broke his silence online with a short post that only made things worse. Don't believe everything you see, he wrote. No apology, no context. Fans dragged him instantly. Emotions ran high as people accused him of gaslighting, of deflecting, of refusing to take accountability yet again. Rashida didn't like the post. She didn't comment. That absence spoke volumes. Insiders claimed she saw the post and simply whispered, he still doesn't get it. Friends began choosing sides quietly. Some checked in on Rashida daily, bringing food, offering to sit in silence. Others avoided Kirk altogether, tired of defending behavior they could no longer explain. One longtime friend reportedly told him, "You're running out of chances, not just with her, but with all of us." Kirk brushed it off publicly, but privately it hit hard. The isolation crept in, heavier than the backlash. Behind closed doors, conversations continued, raw and exhausting. Rashida demanded honesty, not rehearsed explanations. She asked questions she'd been too afraid to ask before. How long had this been going on? Why that hotel? Why lie? Kirk's answers shifted, not drastically, but enough to make trust wobble further. He insisted nothing physical happened, that the meeting was brief, that the leaked footage made it look worse than it was. Rashida shot back, then why didn't you tell me before the world did? The mystery woman, silent until now, finally felt the heat. Her socials went private. Friends of friends claimed she was panicking, insisting she never meant to cause drama, that Kirk told her his marriage was complicated. That word lit a fire. Complicated. Fans laughed bitterly at how often that excuse showed up when lines were crossed. According to whispers, she reached out to Kirk, furious and scared. You said this wouldn't happen, she allegedly told him. Kirk snapped back that she needed to stay quiet, making it clear his priority was damage control, not her feelings. Rashida overheard part of that call. Not the words, but the tone. It was enough. She confronted him again, voice shaking this time. You're protecting everyone but me, she said. Kirk tried to explain, saying silence was strategic, that lawyers advised it. Rashida didn't care. I'm your wife, not a strategy, she replied. The family was left divided as word of these arguments leaked to relatives, each side interpreting the situation through their own biases. Fans started noticing subtle changes. Rashida stopped wearing her ring in recent photos. Kirk appeared alone at events he usually attended with her. Every detail became evidence. Some fans begged Rashida to leave, flooding her comments with encouragement and heartbreak emojis. Others prayed for reconciliation, clinging to the image of a family that had already survived so much. Emotions ran high because this wasn't just gossip anymore. It was a mirror for anyone who had ever forgiven too much. Then came the twist no one expected. A second clip surfaced. Shorter, shakier, but unmistakable. Kirk and the same woman in the hotel elevator, standing closer than business required. No kissing, no touching, just proximity and familiarity that screamed intimacy. Fans were shocked all over again. Kirk's explanation collapsed under the weight of visual proof. Blogs updated headlines. Timelines reignited. Rashida saw the clip before Kirk even knew it was out. This time, she didn't laugh. She packed a bag that night. Not everything, just enough. When Kirk realized what was happening, panic replaced defensiveness. He begged her to stay, to talk, to not let the internet win. Rashida stopped at the door, tears finally spilling. "This isn't about them," she said. "This is about me choosing peace." Those words echoed long after she left. The house felt empty in a way Kirk had never experienced. Not quiet, but hollow. He scrolled through old photos, memories of smiles that now felt staged. Regret set in, heavy and relentless. For the first time, he considered that this time might be different. That forgiveness might not come. Fans sensed the shift too. Sympathy crept in for Rashida, while Kirk faced the consequences of patterns he swore he'd broken. As days passed, neither confirmed nor denied a separation. The unanswered questions kept viewers hooked. Was this a break or the beginning of the end? Would Rashida return or finally walk away for good? And what role would the mystery woman play now that the secret was fully exposed? The story was far from over, and everyone could feel it. Something had changed permanently, and no amount of explanation could rewind the moment that hotel footage went public. The days that followed felt stretched and unreal, like time was moving but nothing was actually settling. Rashida stayed with a close friend, keeping her location quiet while the internet speculated nonstop. Every hour brought a new rumor, a new source, a new angle that somehow made the situation feel heavier. Fans were shocked by how silent she remained. No quotes, no subtweets, no cryptic captions, just silence, and somehow that silence spoke louder than any statement could. Kirk, on the other hand, unraveled publicly and privately at the same time. He started calling people he hadn't spoken to in years, searching for validation, for someone to say this wasn't as bad as it looked. But the responses weren't what he hoped for. One friend told him bluntly, "You didn't just get caught, you got exposed." That word stuck with him. Exposed. Because deep down, he knew this wasn't about a single hallway or an elevator ride. It was about choices stacking up until they collapsed. Behind the scenes, Rashida finally let her guard down with a small circle of people she trusted. Emotions ran high as she replayed moments she'd ignored for the sake of peace. Late nights, guarded phone calls, sudden trips that came with vague explanations. "I wanted to believe so bad," she admitted, voice breaking. "I convinced myself trust meant not asking questions." Her friends listened, some angry on her behalf, others heartbroken watching her come to terms with a reality she'd fought to avoid. Meanwhile, the mystery woman's silence cracked. A friend of hers leaked a message exchange that sent fans into another frenzy. In the messages, she claimed Kirk told her Rashida already knew about their meetings. That one line changed everything. Fans were shocked by the implication. If true, it meant Kirk wasn't just hiding something, he was rewriting the truth depending on who he was talking to. Kirk denied the messages immediately, calling them fake, but the damage was done. Doubt had fully replaced benefit of the doubt. Rashida saw the screenshots late that night. This time, there was no dramatic reaction. Just a quiet nod, like a puzzle piece finally locking into place. "He made me look foolish," she said softly. Not to the public, not to the cameras, to herself. And that, more than anything, hurt the most. Betrayal is painful, but humiliation cuts deeper. Family members started applying pressure from all sides. Some urged reconciliation, reminding her of history, of kids, of the image they'd built together. Others encouraged distance, saying love shouldn't require constant self-sacrifice. The family was left divided, group chats tense, conversations ending abruptly when opinions clashed. Rashida felt pulled in every direction, yet more certain than ever that she needed space to hear her own thoughts over everyone else's noise. Kirk requested a private meeting. No cameras, no phones, just them. When they finally sat across from each other, the air was thick with everything unsaid. He apologized again, this time without excuses. He admitted he liked the attention, the escape, the feeling of not being held accountable for once. "I didn't think it would go this far," he confessed. Rashida looked at him, eyes tired but clear. "It always goes this far," she replied. "It just took longer this time." He promised therapy, transparency, change. Words Rashida had heard before, words that once sounded hopeful and now felt hollow. "I believe you mean it," she said. "I just don't know if meaning it is enough anymore." That sentence hung between them, heavy and final. Kirk realized then that this wasn't a fight he could talk his way out of. This was about trust that had been chipped away until there was nothing solid left to stand on. Fans reacted strongly to every leaked detail of that meeting. Some praised Rashida's strength, calling her growth inspiring. Others accused Kirk of playing victim now that consequences were real. Emotions ran high as people projected their own experiences onto the situation, turning the comment sections into confessionals. "This is why I left," one fan wrote. "This is why I stayed," another replied. The story had become bigger than them, a symbol of cycles people recognized all too well. Then came another twist. A source claimed Rashida had consulted a lawyer, not necessarily for divorce, but to understand her options. That distinction mattered, but it didn't stop headlines from screaming separation. Kirk saw the reports and spiraled. Fear replaced pride. He sent long messages she didn't answer, voice notes she didn't open. The lack of response was its own answer. Silence had become her boundary. The mystery woman, now fully exposed, allegedly reached out to Rashida directly. The message was short, apologetic, claiming she never intended to hurt anyone. Rashida read it once and didn't reply. Later, she told a friend, "An apology without accountability is just noise." Fans applauded her restraint when rumors of the message surfaced. They were shocked by her ability to remain composed while so many others chased clout from the chaos. As weeks passed, the question wasn't just whether they'd stay together, but whether they could ever go back to who they were before the leaked footage. Kirk started confronting his own patterns, realizing how often he'd relied on forgiveness as a safety net. Rashida began rediscovering parts of herself she'd quieted to keep the peace. Both were changing, but not necessarily in the same direction. The story reached a boiling point when Rashida finally broke her silence publicly with a single sentence. "Healing sometimes means choosing yourself, even when it hurts." No names, no accusations, just truth. Fans were shocked by how powerful it felt. Emotions ran high as people interpreted it as confirmation, closure, or a warning. Kirk saw the post and knew the narrative had shifted again, this time beyond his control. Where things would land was still unclear. Reconciliation hadn't been ruled out, but neither had walking away. Trust was no longer assumed. It had to be earned, rebuilt from the ground up, if at all. And as fans continued to watch, debate, and speculate, one thing was undeniable. This wasn't just another scandal. It was a turning point, and nothing about their relationship would ever look the same again. The aftermath settled in slowly, like dust after a collapse, and everyone involved felt it in different ways. Rashida focused on routine, waking early, keeping busy, filling her days so her mind wouldn't spiral back to the same questions. Friends noticed a shift in her energy. She was calmer, but there was a distance, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. Emotions ran high beneath the surface, but she refused to let them control her. "I'm tired of reacting," she told one friend. "I want to move with intention this time." Kirk watched all of this from the outside, realizing how unfamiliar it felt not to be included in her daily life. He tried to occupy himself with work, but concentration slipped. Every room reminded him of what he stood to lose. He replayed conversations in his head, wondering where honesty could have changed the outcome. Regret became his constant companion, heavy and persistent. Fans were shocked to see him so visibly subdued at a recent appearance. No jokes, no bravado, just a man carrying consequences he could no longer dodge. The family dynamic continued to fracture. Some relatives reached out to Rashida privately, apologizing for past advice that encouraged endurance over happiness. Others still believed reconciliation was inevitable, insisting this was just another storm they'd weather together. The family was left divided, and holidays loomed with uncomfortable questions about seating arrangements and unspoken tension. Rashida made it clear she wouldn't be pressured. "I love my family," she said, "but I won't sacrifice myself to make them comfortable." Fans dissected every move. When Rashida posted a photo smiling at a small gathering, speculation exploded. Was she moving on? Was this a statement? Emotions ran high as people debated whether happiness meant closure or simply survival. Kirk noticed too, feeling a pang of jealousy mixed with relief. He wanted her happy, he told himself, but he also wanted to be the reason. That realization stung. Then another unexpected twist surfaced. A former associate of Kirk's claimed the hotel meeting wasn't the first, just the first to be seen. The claim spread quickly, igniting outrage and disbelief. Kirk denied it immediately, but denial felt weaker this time. Fans were shocked by how quickly trust eroded once doubt took root. Rashida heard the rumor and didn't react publicly. Privately, she acknowledged it as further proof she'd done the right thing by stepping back. "Truth has a way of surfacing," she said quietly. The mystery woman faded from the spotlight, but her shadow lingered. Whispers suggested she felt misled, caught in a narrative bigger than she understood. Some fans expressed sympathy, others none at all. The focus shifted back to Kirk and Rashida, where it had always belonged. Accountability became the central theme, and Kirk began to grasp that apologies alone wouldn't repair years of strain. Therapy sessions forced Kirk to confront patterns he'd rationalized for too long. He admitted to avoiding discomfort, seeking validation outside his marriage instead of addressing problems head-on. It wasn't flattering, but it was honest. For the first time, he wasn't trying to spin the story. He was trying to understand it. Fans who learned of this were cautiously optimistic, but skepticism remained. Emotions ran high as people questioned whether growth motivated by loss was genuine or simply fear-driven. Rashida, meanwhile, rediscovered joy in unexpected places. Small wins, quiet mornings, laughter without tension. She realized how much energy she'd spent managing someone else's mistakes. Peace feels different, she told a friend. It's not loud, but it's steady. That steadiness became her compass. She wasn't closing the door completely, but she wasn't waiting behind it either. A mutual friend attempted to facilitate another conversation. This time, the tone was different. No accusations, no defenses, just honesty. Kirk acknowledged he'd taken her forgiveness for granted. Rashida acknowledged she'd stayed longer than she should have out of fear of starting over. There was sadness, but also respect. Fans were shocked when word leaked that the meeting ended with a hug, not reconciliation, but understanding. Emotions ran high because it felt mature, unresolved, real. Public pressure intensified as rumors of a possible announcement circulated. Was it a separation? A reconciliation? Something in between? Rashida refused to rush clarity for the sake of headlines. I don't owe anyone my timeline, she said privately. Kirk agreed, for once aligning with her pace rather than his panic. When they finally appeared together briefly at a family event, the internet erupted. Body language was analyzed relentlessly. Distance noted, smiles questioned. Fans argued in real time about what it meant. The family was left divided even more visibly, some relieved, others confused. Rashida and Kirk said nothing, letting silence do the work words once failed to accomplish. The reality was messier than any storyline. Love still existed, but so did hurt. Forgiveness hovered as a possibility, not a promise. Both understood that whatever came next couldn't be a return to the old version of their relationship. It would have to be something new, built carefully, or not at all. As weeks turned into months, the scandal lost its immediate heat but not its impact. Lessons lingered. Trust, once cracked, doesn't shatter loudly again, it erodes quietly. Fans continued to follow, invested not just in drama, but in the outcome of choices made under pressure. Emotions ran high because everyone wanted resolution, but life rarely delivers neat endings. And so the story remained open, shaped by growth, regret, and the slow, deliberate work of healing. Whether together or apart, Rashida and Kirk stood changed by the moment that hotel footage went public, knowing that some lines, once crossed, redefine everything that follows. Time moved forward, but the tension never fully disappeared. Rashida settled into a rhythm that felt unfamiliar yet empowering. She stopped explaining herself to people who weren't living her reality. Every choice she made now came with intention, not fear. Friends noticed she laughed more freely, but when the laughter faded, there was a seriousness behind her eyes that hadn't been there before. This wasn't sadness. It was clarity. Kirk felt that shift from a distance. The man who once assumed forgiveness would always be waiting now faced the uncertainty of maybe. He tried to show change without demanding recognition for it. Fewer posts, more listening, more restraint. Fans were shocked by how quiet he became, interpreting it as guilt, growth, or strategy depending on their perspective. Emotions ran high because no one could tell if this was a turning point or just another pause before history repeated itself. The kids sensed everything, even what wasn't said. Rashida made it a point to keep their world as stable as possible, shielding them from headlines and whispers. Kirk showed up consistently, determined not to let his mistakes cost him that bond. In private moments, Rashida admitted this was the hardest part. I can forgive for myself, she said, but I won't normalize pain for them. That line became her boundary. Fans began debating less about blame and more about outcomes. Some wanted a redemption arc. Others wanted closure. The family was left divided in a quieter way now, no longer explosive but still tense. Conversations stayed surface level, careful not to reopen wounds. Holidays passed with politeness instead of warmth. It was progress, but not peace. Another rumor surfaced, this time about a possible joint statement. Speculation spread like wildfire. Would they address the footage together? Confirm their status? Emotions ran high as people waited, refreshing feeds, reading into every delay. When no statement came, frustration followed. Rashida wasn't interested in feeding curiosity. Kirk, for once, followed her lead. Behind the scenes, a conversation happened that changed everything. Rashida asked Kirk a question she'd avoided for years. If this never went public, would you have stopped? Kirk didn't answer right away. The honesty it demanded scared him. Finally, he admitted, I don't know. That answer hurt more than a lie would have, but it was real. Rashida nodded slowly. That's why space matters, she said. Because I need to know who you are when no one's watching. Fans later sensed this shift without knowing the details. The tone changed. The narrative softened, not because things were fixed, but because they were finally being faced without illusion. Emotions ran high as people recognized the complexity. Love doesn't disappear overnight, neither does damage. The mystery woman's name stopped trending, but the lesson she represented remained. Secrecy had consequences. Attention had a price. Kirk understood now that validation borrowed from outside his marriage came with interest he couldn't afford. Rashida understood that strength didn't mean enduring endlessly. It meant choosing herself even when it scared her. Weeks later, Kirk made a quiet gesture. Not a public apology, not a grand display. He wrote Rashida a letter. No excuses, no defenses, just accountability. He acknowledged the patterns, the entitlement, the way he leaned on her resilience instead of respecting it. Rashida read it alone. She cried, not because it fixed anything, but because it finally sounded like truth. Fans were shocked when Rashida was spotted wearing her ring again briefly, then not at all days later. Emotions ran high as people tried to decode meaning where there might not have been any. The reality was simpler and harder. She wasn't making promises, she was allowing herself options. Another meeting happened, this time with a counselor present. Boundaries were discussed. Trust was defined, not assumed. Kirk listened more than he spoke. Rashida felt heard, not convinced, but respected. That difference mattered. The family was left divided in their opinions, but Rashida stopped seeking approval. This is between us, she reminded them. Not the internet. When asked privately if reconciliation was on the table, Rashida didn't say yes or no. She said, healing doesn't rush. Fans reacted strongly when that quote leaked, seeing it as hope or hesitation depending on their bias. Emotions ran high because uncertainty is uncomfortable, and people wanted answers. Kirk continued therapy, confronting uncomfortable truths about ego and entitlement. He learned that remorse without change is manipulation, even when unintended. This time, he committed to consistency, knowing that words had lost their power. Rashida watched from a distance, not monitoring, not policing, just observing. Trust, if it returned, would do so slowly or not at all. The internet moved on to the next scandal, but this story lingered for those invested. Not because of drama, but because it felt real. Messy, unresolved. Fans saw pieces of themselves in it. The fear of leaving, the fear of staying, the courage required for both. As time passed, the question shifted again. It wasn't will they stay together. It was who are they becoming because of this. Rashida stepped into her independence with grace. Kirk faced humility without shortcuts. The hotel footage that once defined everything became a reference point, not the whole story. And still, no final chapter was written. Maybe that was the point. Some stories don't end cleanly. They evolve, they teach. They leave scars and lessons in equal measure. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. The trust that was once taken for granted would never be again, and every step forward would be chosen, not assumed. The distance between them became a strange kind of mirror. Every interaction reflected how much had changed and how much still hurt. Rashida stopped asking herself what the public expected and started asking what she could live with long term. That question haunted her more than any headline ever could. Peace had become non-negotiable, even if it meant letting go of a future she once fought to protect. Kirk felt that shift deeply. For the first time, he understood that access to her life was no longer automatic. Every conversation felt earned or withheld based on his actions, not his intentions. That reality humbled him in ways public backlash never could. He realized how often he'd mistaken endurance for loyalty and forgiveness for permission. Emotions ran high internally, but he resisted the urge to dramatize his growth. He knew now that change didn't announce itself. It showed up quietly, consistently, or not at all. Rashida began setting boundaries with everyone, not just Kirk. Friends who pushed for answers were gently shut down. Family members who pressured her were reminded that support didn't mean control. The family was left divided, but Rashida stopped internalizing their discomfort. I'm not breaking the family, she said firmly during one tense conversation. I'm breaking a cycle. That statement marked a turning point for her. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about self-respect. Fans noticed the evolution even without direct explanations. Her energy shifted from defensive to grounded. Posts felt intentional, not reactive. People commented that she looked lighter, stronger, more centered. Emotions ran high as supporters rallied around her growth, while critics quietly faded. Kirk watched from afar, proud and pained at the same time. He admired her strength, even as it highlighted his failures. Another rumor surfaced, this time suggesting Kirk was frustrated by the slow pace of reconciliation. Insiders claimed he felt punished indefinitely, trapped in limbo. When confronted privately, Kirk admitted the feeling but acknowledged it was part of accountability. I don't get to rush healing, he said. Especially not healing I damaged. That awareness didn't erase his impatience, but it kept him from acting on it. Rashida, meanwhile, grappled with her own internal conflict. Forgiveness came easily to her by nature, but trust did not. She questioned whether reopening that door would honor or betray herself. Late at night, she replayed moments of joy and moments of pain, weighing them against each other. Emotions ran high in those quiet hours, when clarity felt close but never complete. A breakthrough came unexpectedly during a casual conversation. Kirk spoke honestly about his fear of losing her, not as a possession, but as a partner who knew him fully. He admitted he'd hidden parts of himself not just from her, but from himself. Rashida listened, cautious but open. She didn't promise anything. She didn't withdraw either. It was a small step, but it mattered. Fans were shocked when they were seen together again in a neutral space, not romantic, not distant, just present. Speculation exploded. Was this progress or performative? Emotions ran high as people projected their hopes and disappointments onto a moment that was never meant to be public. Rashida ignored the noise. Kirk learned to do the same. Therapy continued, and with it, uncomfortable truths. Kirk confronted the entitlement that had quietly shaped his choices. Rashida confronted the fear of starting over. Both realized that staying together would require more courage than separating. That realization didn't make the decision easier. It made it heavier. The mystery woman became a footnote rather than a focal point. Her role was no longer central, but the lesson remained. Secrecy poisons intimacy. Avoidance breeds damage. Rashida stopped seeing her as the problem and started seeing the pattern as the enemy. That shift freed her from misplaced anger and redirected her focus inward. The family dynamic softened slightly with time. Tension didn't disappear, but respect grew. Some relatives apologized for pushing their own fears onto her choices. Others remained skeptical, but quieter. The family was left divided, yet less combative. Progress came in small, imperfect increments. Fans evolved too. Outrage cooled into reflection. Comment sections filled with stories of boundaries, healing, and hard decisions. Emotions ran high for different reasons now. Not shock, but recognition. The story resonated because it didn't offer easy answers. Rashida eventually shared a rare candid moment with Kirk, admitting she missed who they used to be, but not at the cost of who she was becoming. Kirk responded with honesty instead of persuasion. "I don't want the oldest," he said. "I want something better, if you do." That distinction mattered. It wasn't a plea. It was an invitation. Time remained the deciding factor. Trust rebuilt slowly, brick by brick, or revealed itself unable to stand. Rashida allowed herself to feel without committing to outcomes. Kirk learned to show up without expectations. Both understood that whatever happened next had to be rooted in truth, not fear. The leaked footage that once detonated their world became a reference point, not a destination. It marked the moment everything cracked open, but not the end of the story. Growth followed damage, not neatly, not linearly, but genuinely. As the dust settled further, one thing became clear to everyone watching. This wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation or a dramatic breakup. It was something rarer. Two people confronting themselves in real time, choosing honesty over image, and learning that love without accountability isn't love at all. And while the final outcome remained unwritten, one truth stood firm. Rashida reclaimed her voice. Kirk faced his reflection. And the trust they once assumed would now, if it returned, be built with intention, humility, and respect, or not at all. The waiting became its own test. Not knowing where things would land forced both of them to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. Rashida stopped rehearsing outcomes in her head. She no longer imagined dramatic reunions or clean breaks. She focused on what was real, what was happening in front of her, and what she could control. That shift grounded her in a way she hadn't felt in years. Kirk noticed it immediately. Her tone was different, calmer, firmer. She wasn't seeking reassurance or offering it. She was present without being attached. That scared him more than anger ever did. Anger meant emotion. Distance meant possibility of finality. Emotions ran high for him in quiet moments, when he realized how close he'd come to losing something irreplaceable without ever fully valuing it. Another conversation unfolded weeks later, unplanned and unfiltered. Rashida asked him to tell the story again, from his perspective, without minimizing, without protecting his image. Kirk hesitated, then started from the beginning. Not the hotel, not the footage, but the emotional distance that predated it. He admitted to feeling insecure, aging, replaceable. He confessed he sought validation instead of vulnerability. The honesty was raw, uncomfortable, and long overdue. Rashida listened, absorbing each word carefully. When he finished, she didn't rush to respond. She finally said, "I wish you had trusted me with that instead of hiding." It wasn't an accusation. It was grief. Grief for the intimacy that could have been. That moment hit Kirk harder than any criticism ever had. He realized betrayal isn't always about desire. Sometimes it's about avoidance. Fans were shocked when snippets of that conversation leaked indirectly through a mutual friend. Emotions ran high as people debated whether vulnerability excused damage. Some applauded Kirk's self-awareness. Others dismissed it as too little, too late. Rashida refused to engage. She wasn't interested in public approval of private growth. The family dynamic continued evolving in the background. Some relatives began to understand that pushing for reconciliation was more about their discomfort than Rashida's happiness. Others still struggled, but learned to keep opinions to themselves. The family was left divided, but the pressure eased. Respect replaced urgency. Kirk made another choice quietly. He stepped back from situations that fed his ego. Fewer late nights, fewer environments where boundaries blurred, no announcements, no credit sought. Rashida noticed, not because she was monitoring him, but because consistency leaves a different kind of footprint. Still, she reminded herself that change needed time to prove itself. Emotions ran high internally for Rashida too. There were moments of nostalgia, flashes of the love they once shared freely. There were also moments of anger that surfaced unexpectedly. Healing wasn't linear. She allowed herself to feel without judging the feeling. That permission became liberating. Another unexpected twist came when a third party attempted to profit from the situation, claiming exclusive information about the hotel footage and what happened before and after. Fans were shocked by the audacity. Kirk and Rashida, for the first time since the scandal broke, aligned immediately. They shut it down together, refusing to let their pain become someone else's paycheck. That united front felt familiar, almost comforting. Afterward, Rashida acknowledged it out loud. "We still make a good team when it matters," she said. Kirk didn't mistake it for reconciliation, but he held onto it as hope. Emotions ran high because it proved something important hadn't been completely destroyed. The mystery woman resurfaced briefly through a second-hand apology relayed by a mutual acquaintance. Rashida accepted the apology internally, not because it erased anything, but because carrying resentment no longer served her. She didn't respond. Closure didn't require conversation. Time continued doing what it does best, softening edges while sharpening truths. Rashida became more decisive, more protective of her peace. Kirk became more introspective, less defensive. Neither pretended the leaked footage hadn't happened. It remained a line in the sand, a before and after that defined everything moving forward. Fans began to notice less drama and more maturity. Engagement slowed, but respect grew. Emotions ran high in a quieter way, with people reflecting instead of reacting. The story no longer felt like spectacle. It felt like life. One evening, Rashida posed a question that surprised them both. "If we rebuild, what does that look like?" Kirk didn't answer immediately. When he did, he didn't describe the past. He described accountability, transparency, and space for her autonomy. He didn't promise perfection. He promised effort without entitlement. Rashida considered it carefully. "And if we don't?" she asked. Kirk swallowed hard. "Then I still need to be better," he said. "Because you deserved better, regardless." That answer mattered. It wasn't conditional. It wasn't strategic. It was acceptance. Emotions ran high for Rashida in that moment, not because she'd made a decision, but because she felt seen without being pressured. For the first time, staying or leaving felt like a choice, not an obligation. As months passed, the question of their future remained open, but no longer painful. Uncertainty transformed into possibility. Rashida trusted herself to choose wisely, whatever that choice ended up being. Kirk learned to live without guarantees, understanding that trust isn't owed, it's earned. The story that began with hotel footage and public outrage evolved into something far more complex. It became about boundaries, growth, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths. Fans were shocked not by scandal anymore, but by the restraint, the maturity, the refusal to perform pain for applause. And while the final outcome still hadn't been declared, one thing was undeniable. Both were changed, not by exposure, but by reflection. Whatever path they chose next would be walked consciously, not blindly. The internet would eventually move on, as it always does. But for Rashida and Kirk, the lessons would remain. Trust would never again be assumed. Love would never again be maintained at the expense of self-respect. And if there was a future together, it would be built slowly, honestly, and without illusion, or there would be no future at all. The stillness that followed felt earned, not empty. Rashida noticed how different her thoughts sounded when they weren't crowded by outside voices. She trusted herself again, and that trust became the anchor she'd been missing. Decisions no longer felt urgent. They felt deliberate. She wasn't waiting for clarity to arrive from Kirk or from public opinion. She was creating it internally, one boundary at a time. Kirk adjusted to a new reality where progress wasn't measured by forgiveness granted, but by consistency maintained. He learned to sit with discomfort without performing remorse. There were days he wanted to explain himself again, to add context, to make sure she understood his intentions. But he stopped himself. Intention without impact had been his pattern. This time, he let his actions speak, even when silence felt risky. Fans noticed the absence of chaos and didn't know what to do with it. Outrage thrives on reaction, and without it, attention waned. Emotions ran high less often, replaced by long threads analyzing growth, accountability, and emotional labor. The story evolved in public consciousness from scandal to case study. Some lost interest. Others leaned in deeper, recognizing themselves in the quiet parts. Rashida had a moment of reckoning one afternoon while going through old photos. Not for nostalgia, but for truth. She saw the smiles, the family moments, the milestones. She also remembered the effort it took to maintain them. Love had been real, but so had the cost. She closed the album without tears, surprised by the calm that followed. Acceptance didn't erase pain, it softened it. Kirk experienced his own reckoning during a session where he was asked to name what he feared most. He expected to say losing his marriage, his reputation, his family. Instead, the answer surprised him. Being unchanged, he said. The idea that he could go through all of this and still remain the same terrified him more than any consequence. That realization grounded him. Another meeting happened naturally, without planning or build-up. They talked about logistics, schedules, life. It felt ordinary in the best way. No emotional fireworks, no heavy symbolism, just two people navigating shared history with new awareness. Rashida noticed how present he was, how he didn't rush or defend. Kirk noticed how steady she felt, how she no longer over-explained her needs. Growth didn't announce itself, it showed up like this. The family dynamic continued to settle into something less volatile. Expectations lowered, respect increased. The family was left divided in perspective but unified in one thing. They saw change, even if they interpreted it differently. Gatherings became manageable again, not perfect, but possible. Fans were shocked when a clip resurfaced of an old interview where Rashida spoke about forgiveness. This time, the context felt different. Comments filled with reflections rather than reactions. Emotions ran high in a reflective way. People shared how they'd learned that forgiveness doesn't require proximity, and love doesn't require sacrifice of self. The mystery woman was rarely mentioned now, her role reduced to a catalyst rather than a character. Rashida had moved past assigning blame externally. Kirk had stopped externalizing responsibility. The narrative tightened around accountability, where it belonged. A subtle shift occurred when Rashida began speaking more openly with close friends about her fears. Not of being alone, but of repeating patterns. She worried that comfort could blur boundaries again. That familiarity could dull vigilance. Her friends reminded her that awareness changes everything. "You're not the same woman you were," one said. Rashida believed it. Kirk faced a similar fear from the opposite side. He worried that no matter how much he changed, he'd always be seen through the lens of his worst decisions. Therapy taught him that redemption isn't guaranteed, and that was okay. Growth wasn't a transaction, it was a responsibility. Emotions ran high when an unexpected moment of humor broke through during one of their conversations. Laughter came easily, surprising them both. It wasn't relief, it was connection, real, unforced, and fleeting. Rashida didn't cling to it. Kirk didn't romanticize it, they let it exist without expectation. That restraint mattered. Fans speculated again, briefly, before attention drifted. Without constant updates, there was nothing to feed obsession. The internet moved on. For the first time, that felt like a gift instead of abandonment. Rashida reflected on what rebuilding would require if she chose it. Transparency without surveillance. Accountability without punishment. Partnership without hierarchy. These weren't demands, they were standards. She felt strong enough now to uphold them, regardless of the outcome. Kirk reflected on what loving her meant beyond being married to her. It meant honoring her autonomy, even if it led away from him. That understanding hurt, but it also freed him from entitlement. Love became something he offered, not something he claimed. Another small but meaningful step occurred when Kirk took responsibility publicly, not with theatrics, but with clarity. He acknowledged harm without framing himself as a victim. Fans were shocked by the restraint. Emotions ran high because sincerity felt rare in a space built on spectacle. Rashida didn't endorse it publicly. She didn't need to. The gesture wasn't for her validation. It was for his integrity. Time continued to pass, steady and unremarkable. Healing lived there, in the ordinary days. Rashida built routines that centered her peace. Kirk maintained habits that supported his growth. Neither rushed the story toward an ending. When asked privately if she believed in second chances, Rashida answered carefully. "I believe in changed people," she said. Not repeated apologies. That distinction guided her. Kirk understood it as a challenge, not a threat. The leaked footage that once defined everything became background noise in memory. Not forgotten, but contextualized. It marked the moment illusion broke. What followed mattered more. As the chapter drew toward an undefined close, one truth stood firm. Whatever came next would be chosen consciously. No more autopilot, no more endurance mistaken for love. Whether together or apart, they would move forward with clarity earned through discomfort. And that, more than any headline or rumor, became the real story. Not scandal, but accountability. Not drama, but growth. Not certainty, but intention. The quiet confidence Rashida carried now changed how every interaction felt. She no longer braced herself before conversations. She no longer rehearsed responses meant to keep the peace. Instead, she spoke plainly, calmly, without apology. That alone marked a transformation. Kirk felt it every time they talked. The power dynamic had shifted, not through control, but through self-assurance. Emotions ran high for him because he understood this version of her wasn't shaped by compromise. It was shaped by clarity. Their communication became less frequent but more intentional. No more checking in out of habit. No more conversations fueled by guilt or fear. When they spoke, it was because there was something real to say. Rashida appreciated that restraint. It made space for honesty instead of noise. Kirk learned that presence mattered more than persistence. Fans, still watching from a distance, were shocked by how undramatic everything had become. No messy leaks. No emotional posts. No public ultimatums. Emotions ran high in a different way now, especially among viewers who expected chaos and instead witnessed maturity. Some accused them of hiding the truth. Others respected the privacy. Rashida didn't concern herself with either reaction. Peace had made her selective. Another conversation unfolded that felt pivotal. Rashida asked Kirk what he thought love required now, after everything. Not what he wanted, not what he hoped for, but what he believed love demanded. Kirk thought carefully before answering. Consistency, he said, humility, and the willingness to lose someone if it means doing right by them. The words weren't polished. They were heavy. Rashida nodded slowly. It was the first time she felt his understanding matched her reality. Still, doubt lingered. Not loud, not overwhelming, but present. Rashida questioned whether trust could ever feel natural again. Whether she'd always be alert, scanning for cracks. Therapy helped her unpack that fear. She learned that trust after betrayal is different, but not impossible. It just requires boundaries that don't bend under pressure. That knowledge empowered her. Kirk faced a parallel challenge. He had to accept that even if trust returned, it might never look the same. There would be no reset button. No erasing history. Only integration. He learned to release the fantasy of being fully redeemed in her eyes and focus instead on being accountable in his own. Emotions ran high during that realization, but it grounded him. The family observed these shifts quietly. Some members admitted they'd underestimated Rashida's strength. Others acknowledged Kirk's effort with cautious optimism. The family was left divided in belief, but unified in respect for the process. No one pushed anymore. They watched. Another subtle twist emerged when Rashida declined an opportunity that would have required her to publicly discuss the scandal. Fans were shocked. The offer was lucrative, the platform massive, but Rashida chose silence over spectacle. My healing isn't content, she told a friend. That decision solidified her priorities. Kirk supported that choice without hesitation. Not because it benefited him, but because it aligned with the accountability he was learning. That alignment didn't go unnoticed by Rashida. She registered it quietly, adding it to the mental ledger she no longer rushed to balance. Time continued to do its work. Emotions softened, clarity sharpened. The story faded from daily conversation, but its lessons remained active. Rashida felt stronger standing alone than she ever had standing in compromise. Kirk felt steadier owning his flaws than hiding behind defenses. Another meeting occurred months later, casual and unplanned. They talked about future goals, not shared ones, but individual. Rashida spoke about growth, creativity, independence. Kirk spoke about discipline, self-awareness, responsibility. There was no tension in the room. No expectation. Just mutual respect. That absence of pressure felt like progress. Fans, when they caught glimpses of this evolution, reacted with surprise. Emotions ran high because the narrative no longer fit neat categories. It wasn't a redemption arc. It wasn't a breakup saga. It was something messier and more honest. Many viewers found that unsettling. Others found it refreshing. Rashida reflected later that night on how far she'd come. The pain hadn't vanished, but it no longer defined her. She wasn't waiting for closure from Kirk or anyone else. Closure had arrived quietly, in the form of self-trust. That realization brought peace. Kirk reflected too, acknowledging that regardless of outcome, this experience had forced him to grow in ways comfort never would have. He no longer chased validation. He built it internally. The difference was subtle but profound. The leaked footage that once ignited everything now felt distant, almost surreal. Not because it didn't matter, but because it had served its purpose. It exposed what needed to be confronted. What followed was the real work. As the chapter neared an unspoken conclusion, one thing was clear. Rashida would never again shrink herself to preserve a relationship. Kirk would never again mistake forgiveness for permission. Those truths existed independently of each other, and that independence mattered. Whether they chose to walk forward together or apart remained undecided. But the decision would be rooted in awareness, not fear. In choice, not obligation. In growth, not habit. And in that way, the story transcended scandal. It became about accountability, autonomy, and the courage to choose differently. Not loudly, not performatively, but honestly. The sense of control Rashida felt over her own life grew stronger with time, and that strength reshaped how she viewed everything that had happened. She stopped asking why it unfolded the way it did and started asking what it taught her. The answer wasn't dramatic. It was simple. She learned that love without safety isn't sustainable, and loyalty without honesty becomes self-betrayal. That understanding settled deep, becoming a compass she trusted more than any promise. Kirk sensed the permanence of that shift. He no longer approached her with urgency or fear. Instead, he approached with respect, aware that the outcome was no longer something he could influence with words. It would be shaped by consistency, patience, and restraint. Emotions ran high for him in moments when he wanted to explain himself again, to remind her of intentions, but he stopped. He understood now that trust grows in silence more than speeches. Their interactions became sparse but meaningful. There was no tension, but also no illusion. Rashida didn't lean into nostalgia. Kirk didn't cling to hope. They existed in a shared space defined by honesty, not expectation. Fans who noticed this evolution were shocked by how little there was to analyze. No conflict meant no spectacle. Emotions ran high for a while as people tried to force meaning where none was offered, then gradually faded. Rashida spent more time reflecting on who she was becoming outside the relationship. She explored interests she'd postponed. She reconnected with parts of herself that had been muted by compromise. This wasn't rebellion, it was restoration. She felt whole in a way she hadn't realized she'd been missing. Peace didn't arrive loudly, it arrived steadily, without conditions. Kirk confronted the reality that growth doesn't guarantee reconciliation. Therapy taught him to accept outcomes without bargaining. He learned to show up without expecting reward. That humility was unfamiliar but grounding. Emotions ran high when he realized that becoming better didn't entitle him to another chance. It simply made him responsible for being better regardless. The family dynamic stabilized into something workable. No one pushed, no one prodded, boundaries were respected more than opinions. The family was left divided in belief, but united in acceptance. Gatherings became manageable, conversations stayed present-focused, the past was acknowledged without being weaponized. Fans shifted their attention to the lessons rather than the drama. Comment sections filled with reflections about boundaries, accountability, and choosing self-respect. Emotions ran high not from outrage but recognition. The story resonated because it mirrored real experiences, not because it delivered scandal. Another subtle moment marked progress. Rashida thanked Kirk for respecting her space. Not as praise, but as acknowledgement. Kirk received it quietly, understanding the weight of that trust. He didn't ask for more. He didn't interpret it as a sign. He let it stand on its own. That restraint mattered. Time passed without milestones, and that was its own kind of healing. No announcements, no declarations, just life unfolding. Rashida felt less defined by what happened and more grounded in what was happening now. Kirk focused on sustaining change without audience or affirmation. Both learned that growth without witnesses is the truest kind. The leaked footage that once detonated everything became a distant memory, referenced only when reflecting on how far they'd come. It no longer carried the same emotional charge. Not because it was forgiven, but because it was integrated. It became part of the story, not the whole story. Rashida eventually acknowledged something important to herself. She wasn't afraid of being alone anymore. That realization shifted everything. Fear no longer dictated her choices. Love became optional, not necessary for completeness. That freedom made her stronger, clearer, and more discerning. Kirk recognized that same shift and accepted it. He understood that her independence wasn't a threat. It was the result of growth. Loving her now meant honoring that autonomy, even if it meant accepting distance. Emotions ran high in quiet moments, but he didn't retreat from them. He let them inform him, not control him. Fans were shocked when months passed without any definitive update. Some demanded closure, others respected the privacy. Rashida didn't feel obligated to provide resolution for public consumption. Her life wasn't a series finale. It was ongoing. Another conversation happened naturally, unplanned, free of weight. They spoke about lessons learned rather than outcomes desired. Rashida shared how she'd learned to listen to discomfort instead of silencing it. Kirk shared how he'd learned to confront insecurity instead of escaping it. There was no promise attached, just mutual understanding. That understanding didn't erase the past, but it reframed it. Pain became a teacher rather than a sentence. Mistakes became reference points instead of identities. Growth felt earned, not performative. As time continued forward, the question of reconciliation remained unanswered, but no longer urgent. Rashida trusted herself to decide when and if the time came. Kirk trusted the process enough not to rush it. Both accepted that clarity can't be forced. The story that began with hotel footage leaked evolved into something quieter and more meaningful. It became about accountability without entitlement, forgiveness without obligation, and love without illusion. Fans who stayed invested weren't waiting for drama anymore. They were watching transformation. And while no one could predict the final outcome, one truth stood firm. Rashida reclaimed her agency. Kirk accepted responsibility. Whatever path lay ahead would be chosen consciously, not inherited from habit or fear. In the end, the most shocking part wasn't the footage, the rumors, or the fallout. It was the refusal to repeat the same cycle. And that choice, made quietly and consistently, became the real resolution, even without a public ending. And now it's your turn to weigh in, because this story is far from simple and the questions are still hanging in the air. After everything you've heard, after every twist, every quiet moment, every hard truth exposed, what do you think comes next? Was the leaked hotel footage the final breaking point, or just the painful wake-up call that forced real change? Do you believe trust can truly be rebuilt after it's been shaken this deeply, or are some lines crossed only once for a reason? Fans are still shocked, emotions are still running high, and opinions are more divided than ever. Some of you see growth, accountability, and a chance at something healthier. Others see a cycle that's been tested one too many times, and that's exactly why your voice matters. Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you stand. If you were in Rashida's position, would you choose forgiveness, distance, or a clean break? And if you were in Kirk's shoes, do you think change should come with another chance, or simply be the right thing to do regardless of the outcome? If this story had you glued from start to finish, make sure you hit that like button to show support. If you want to stay locked in for more dramatic deep dives, shocking twists, and stories that keep the internet talking, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what drops next. And most importantly, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because these conversations go way beyond gossip. They're about trust, boundaries, and choosing yourself. We'll be watching closely as this story continues to unfold, so stay right here, stay engaged, and let us know your thoughts below.